When we open the very first book of the Torah, Bereshit, we find something remarkable. The Torah doesn't begin with the laws given to the Jewish people. It doesn't start with the Exodus from Egypt, or even with Abraham, our first father. Instead, it opens with the creation of the world. Rashi, in his very first commentary on the Torah, asks a penetrating question. Why does the Torah begin with creation rather than with the first commandment given to the Jewish people? He answers that it is in order to establish that Hashem created the entire world, and therefore he has the right to give the land of Israel to whomever he chooses. This opening itself reveals something profound about Eretz Yisrael. It's not merely a political or geographical reality, but rather a spiritual truth embedded in the very fabric of creation itself. The land that would become known as Israel was recognized as special from the earliest moments of human history. When Hashem creates Adam, the Midrash tells us that the dust from which he was formed was gathered from the place of the future temple in Jerusalem. Think about this for a moment. The first human being, the father of all humanity, was created from the earth, of the holiest place on earth. This teaches us that the land of Israel, and particularly Yerushalayim, represents the spiritual center point of all of creation. Just as Adam was meant to be the bridge between the physical and the spiritual worlds, so too is the land of Israel, meant to serve as the connection point between heaven and earth. When we follow the narrative of the Torah, we see that Hashem's choice of this land for the Jewish people wasn't arbitrary. When Hashem first speaks to Abraham, he tells him, Lech lecha, go for yourself from the land, from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. The Zohar explains that these words contain layers upon layers of meaning. Abraham wasn't just being told to relocate geographically. He was being commanded to embark on a spiritual journey, to separate himself from the materialism and the idolatry of his birthplace, and to discover the land that would serve as the vessel for divine revelation in this world. The Arizal teaches us something extraordinary about the spiritual nature of Eretz Yisrael. He explains that there are 10 levels of holiness in the world, and the land of Israel encompasses the highest of these levels. But even within the land of Israel itself, there are gradations of holiness, ascending from the borders of the land to the cities, to Yerushalayim, to Har Bayis, the Temple Mount, and finally to the Kodesh Kadoshim, the Holy of Holies, and from there it radiates outward through the Temple, through Yerushalayim, through the land of Israel, and ultimately to the entire world. The Gemara in Ketubot tells us something that at first sounds almost incomprehensible to modern ears. It states that living in the land of Israel is equivalent to fulfilling all the commandments of the Torah. In fact, the term for the land of Israel in Hebrew is Eretz Yisrael, which can be read, Eretz Arutz, I will run, Yashar Kel, straight to God. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov explains that the air of the land of Israel itself gives wisdom and clarity of mind. When a person lives in Eretz Yisrael, their very consciousness is elevated. The barriers between their soul and their awareness of Hashem becomes thinner. It's not that living in the land exempts one from other commandments, but rather it creates the optimal environment for spiritual growth and connection with the divine. Rabbi Nachman also teaches us about the profound connection between the land of Israel and joy. He famously said, Mitzvah Gedola liyot b'simcha tamid. It's a great mitzvah to be in a state of joy continuously. And he connects this directly to the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, the land itself. He teaches has the power to dispel sadness and depression from a person's heart. It's based on the understanding that sadness and spiritual disconnection are intimately related. When we're in a place of intense spiritual energy, like the land of Israel, it becomes easier to access the joy that comes from closeness to Hashem. Let's delve deeper into what the Zohar teaches about the mystical significance of the land. The Zohar explains that Eretz Yisrael corresponds to the Sphira of Malchut, the divine attribute of kingship. Malchut is the final Sphira in the Kabbalistic system, the point where all the higher spiritual energies gather and manifest in our physical world. The land of Israel, therefore, is the place where heaven and earth kiss, where the spiritual becomes most accessible to the physical. This is why the sages say that the divine presence never departed from the western wall, even after the destruction of the temple. The land retains its spiritual essence, regardless of political circumstances. The relationship between the Jewish people and the land of Israel is unlike any other relationship between a people and their homeland. The Rambam writes in his commentary that living in the land of Israel is not just one mitzvah among many, but rather a commandment that equals all the others. He derives this from various sources in the Torah and the words of the prophets, but beyond the legal halachic obligation, there is something deeper at play. The Arizal teaches that the souls of the Jewish people have a unique spiritual root that corresponds to the spiritual root of the land of Israel. In a sense, the Jewish people and the land are two halves of one spiritual reality. When they're united, both the people and the land flourish. When they're separated, both suffer. This explains something that might otherwise seem strange. Throughout our exile, for 2,000 years, we prayed 3 times a day for our return to the land. We concluded every Passover Seder with the words, "Next year in Jerusalem." We turned towards Jerusalem in prayer. We mention the land in our grace after meals. We mourn its destruction even in our moments of greatest joy by breaking a glass at weddings. Why this obsessive focus on a piece of geography? Because it isn't just land. It was and is the physical location where our spiritual purpose can be most fully realized. The Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses the verse in Devarim where Hashem says that he always has his eyes on the land of Israel, from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. The sages ask, does this mean Hashem doesn't watch over other lands? They answer that Hashem's providence over the land of Israel is direct and immediate, while his providence over other lands is indirect, mediated through angels and natural forces. In Israel we live under what the Torah calls Hanhaga Pratit Begashmiut. This has profound implications for how we live our lives. When we understand that living in the land of Israel we're living under direct divine supervision, it changes how we view everything that happens to us. There are no accidents, no random occurrences. Everything is a message, everything is purposeful. Now of course that is true for life as a whole and for every land, but in the land of Israel it is explicitly manifest. This awareness can transform anxiety into trust, confusion into clarity. Even challenges and difficulties take on new meaning when we recognize them as part of Hashem's direct communication with us. Let me share with you a teaching from the Talmud that opens up an entirely new dimension of understanding. In Masechet Brachot, the Gemara discusses the verse, "A land that Hashem your God seeks out. The eyes of Hashem your God are always upon it." The sages note the unusual language, "seeks out." They explain that Hashem is constantly seeking out our merits in the land of Israel, constantly looking for reasons to bestow blessings and abundance. The Hebrew word used, doresh, implies an active searching, an eager seeking. The land itself creates a relationship between us and Hashem characterized by his desire to give us good. The Zohar takes this even further, explaining that the land of Israel is called Eretz HaChayim, the land of life, while all other lands are called Eretz HaMeitim, the lands of the dead. This isn't meant to be insulting to people that live outside of the land of Israel, but rather it is to teach us something essential about spiritual vitality. In the land of Israel, the connection between the soul and the divine is most direct, most alive. This is why the prophets frequently use imagery of resurrection and return to life when describing the Jewish people's return to their land. Now let's explore what this means practically for our service of Hashem, whether we're currently living in the land of Israel or not. Rabbi Nachman teaches that even when we're physically distant from the land, we can connect to its spiritual essence through intense yearning and desire. The longing itself creates a spiritual bridge. When we daven, pray, when we study Torah, when we perform mitzvot, with the intention of strengthening our connection to Eretz Yisrael, we draw down the spiritual energy of the land into wherever we are. There's a beautiful teaching in the name of the Baal Shem Tov about the power of thought. He teaches that where a person's thoughts are, That's where they truly are. If we constantly think about the land of Israel, if we yearn for it, if we include it in our tefillot, in our prayers and our consciousness, then in a spiritual sense we're already there. This isn't meant to reduce the importance of physical presence in the land. That remains the ideal. But it teaches us that the spiritual reality is accessible through the power of our consciousness and intention. The connection between the land of Israel and Torah is particularly profound. The Gemara in Baba Batra states that the air of the land of Israel makes one wise. The Arizal explains that this isn't merely about the physical air, but about the spiritual atmosphere of the land. Torah learned in Eretz Yisrael has a different quality. It penetrates deeper, it illuminates more clearly, it connects the learner more directly to the divine wisdom embedded in the Torah itself. This is why so many of the greatest Torah scholars throughout history have made the difficult journey to live and study in the Holy Land, despite the hardships and dangers often involved. But there's something even deeper here. The Zohar teaches that the Torah and the land of Israel are intimately connected at their root. The Torah is called Torat Chaim, the Torah of life, and the land of Israel is called Eretz Chaim, the land of life. They're two expressions of the same spiritual reality, the manifestation of the divine vitality in our world. When Torah is studied in the land of Israel, there's a unification of these two expressions, and the lights that are revealed are exponentially greater. In fact, the Torah corresponds to the land of Israel directly. Otniel ben Kenaz recovered the 3,000 lost halakha of Torah, and as a reward was given the city of Kiryat Sefer. Here we see that conquering Torah corresponds directly to conquering the land of Israel. The Arizal taught that every Jewish soul must at some point achieve rectification in the land of Israel. If a soul doesn't have the opportunity to live in the land during a particular lifetime, it will need to return in another incarnation to complete this essential aspect of its spiritual journey. This isn't about reward and punishment, it's about spiritual completion. The soul's ultimate purpose can only be fully realized through connection with the Holy Land. This teaching has practical implications for us today. It means that if we have the opportunity to live in the land of Israel or even to visit it, we should recognize this as a crucial moment in our soul's journey. It's not just a vacation or a life choice, it's a spiritual opportunity that may have been many lifetimes in the making. Even a single tefillah, prayer, at the Kotel HaMaravi, the Western Wall, or by Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron, or even just walking on the ground of Eretz Yisrael can accomplish rectifications that may take years to achieve elsewhere. If Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is the heart of the world, then Yerushalayim, Jerusalem, is the heart of the heart. The Talmud in Yoma tells us that the world was created from the foundation stone, which is the point of the Holy of Holies in the temple in Yerushalayim. From this single point, the sages teach all of creation expanded outwards. This isn't ancient mythology, it's a description of a spiritual reality. Jerusalem is the point where the infinite divine will first contracted to create space for the finite world. Melchizedek refers to Yerushalayim as Shalem, meaning complete. The Zohar says Yerushalayim is complete because it represents the unification of all the divine attributes. It's the place where Chesed and Gevurah, mercy and judgment, come together in perfect balance. It's where the perception of a transcendent God who is beyond all comprehension meets the perception of an immanent God who fills all reality. Jerusalem is paradox made manifest. It's the earthly city that simultaneously is the heavenly Yerushalayim, the physical location that is also a spiritual state. This idea is hinted to in the name Yerushalayim itself, which is a plural, Yerushalayim, meaning there are two cities. There is the Jerusalem here and the Jerusalem above, but both are one. The Western world, the Kotel HaMaravi, has become the focal point of Jewish prayer and yearning. The Talmud tells us that the divine presence never departed from the Western Wall. The Arizal explains that this is because the Western Wall corresponds to the sphere of Malchut in us. Malchut is the attribute that receives all the highest spiritual energies and channels them into our world. Even when the temple was destroyed, even when the Jewish people went into exile, this channel remained open. The Western world continued to function as a conduit for divine energy. When we approach the kotel to daven, to pray, we are recognizing that this place is a spiritual portal. The stones themselves have absorbed millions upon millions of tefillot prayers over the centuries. The Zohar teaches that tears shed at the western wall pierce all the heavenly gates. There's no barrier that can stop them. This is why people often experience such powerful emotions at the kotel. They're encountering a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Now, even if we're unable to live in the land of Israel, we can support the growth and the development of the land of Israel through financial contributions, through giving our time to Torah institutions, to agricultural development, to organizations that help Jews make Aliyah. Every shekel, every dollar, every minute, every act of support for Jewish life in the land is a mitzvah of tremendous significance. We're participating in the fulfillment of prophecy, in the ingathering of the exiles, in the rebuilding of the land after millennia of desolation. But perhaps most importantly, we can live our lives with messianic consciousness. We can train ourselves to see the divine in everything, to recognize that there's no place devoid of Hashem's presence, that every moment is an opportunity for connection with the infinite. This is what the land of Israel teaches us, that the physical and the spiritual can merge, that earth can become heaven. When we live this way, we become like walking pieces of the land of Israel, spreading its light wherever we are. The prophets speak extensively about the future redemption and the central role of the land of Israel in that redemption. Yeshayahu describes a time when the earth will be filled with knowledge of Hashem as water covers the seabed. The Zohar explains that this prophecy is particularly connected to Yerushalayim and the land of Israel. When the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, is rebuilt and the Shekhinah, the divine presence, returns in full glory, the spiritual light that will emanate from Yerushalayim will enlighten the entire world. This isn't metaphorical, it describes a real spiritual transformation that will occur, where the barriers between the physical and the spiritual worlds will dissolve, and all humanity will perceive the reality of Hashem directly. At the end of the book of Yechezkel, the prophet describes the future temple, the future Beit HaMikdash. He sees a stream of water flowing from beneath the temple, growing to a mighty river that brings life and healing wherever it goes. The sages explain this both literally and metaphorically. There will indeed be a physical river, but more importantly, it represents the flow of spiritual vitality, of Torah wisdom, of divine consciousness that will emanate from Yerushalayim to revive and transform the entire world. In that era, the Talmud tells us, the Jewish people will return from all corners of the earth to the land of Israel. But this return won't be like the returns we've seen in history. It will be a return characterized by a complete healing, physical, emotional, and spiritual. The prophet Yeshayahu says that the lame will leap like a deer, the mute will sing, the blind will see. These prophecies speak not just of physical healing, but of spiritual awakening. All the obstacles that prevent us from fully experiencing our connection with Hashem will be removed. We're living in an era when we can see prophecy being fulfilled before our eyes. After 2,000 years of exile, after persecution and pogroms and the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, the Jewish people have returned to their land. Cities that were ruined for centuries are now thriving metropolises. Deserts that were barren for millennia now bloom. The Hebrew language that was dormant has been revived. The prophecies we read in our Torah aren't just ancient history, they're current events unfolding in our lifetime. The land of Israel is not just a piece of real estate in the Middle East, it's the heart of creation, the point where heaven and earth meet, the place where the divine presence most intensely makes itself known in our physical world. It's the inheritance given to our forefathers and to us, the home to which we've yearned to return to for 2,000 years, and the place from which redemption will spread to the entire world. May it be Hashem's will that all the Yehudim, all the Jewish people, in all the four corners of the world return to Eretz Yisrael. May we see the fulfillment of the prophet's visions in our days, the ingathering of the exiles, the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, the revelation of Mashiach, and the transformation of the entire world into a dwelling place of the divine presence. May we merit to walk on the streets of Jerusalem in joy and peace, to see our children and grandchildren learning Torah in the study halls of Yerushalayim, and to witness the complete redemption speedily in our days. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and dropping a comment. It is very appreciated.